The situation. Stranded in the middle of that colorless gray period that one gets in the deepest throes of winter, cabin fever was starting to set in. The only signs of life on the outside were the headlights of the drivers brave enough to take on the dangerous, otherwise dead roads. Nature's makeshift bridges, made up mostly of broken tree limbs, fallen trees, and downed power lines, were everywhere, and posed a great threat to those stupid drivers who wanted to go God knows where. Even more dangerous was all the black ice. And by day, it was present yet avoidable. By night, it was deadly, and it blended in perfectly with its environment. Black on black on black, like some cold, heartless chameleon out there, and hell-bent on showing people their maker, or lack thereof. Life on the inside wasn't much better. Here, the only signs of life were the dancing candle flames, and out-own slowly beating hearts. It was as if we were all living in the colonial era, surviving by the light that emanated from the candle that cast an eerie glow. There was nothing but such to keep us company. We were all in the darkest shadows cast by a town-wide blackout, and it had been like that for days. Perhaps as many as 2 weeks had gone by since the last pulse of electricity had faded. For me, Spencer Princeton, the small town of Northbrook Field, seemed unreachable from the threshold of my front door. The ethereal blackness that covered the whole town was so alien. There was a mysterious, omnipresent hostility to it. I said goodbye to my family, who, understandably so, had left me in charge of looking over the house while they looked for shelter that wasn't filled to capacity. As soon as they faded into the night, I knew I was alone. Cut off from the rest of the world, there was nothing to do but write and read. In the deepest pits of the realm of horror, I could only lay still and have fantasies of my darkest dreams, bursting through some psychic wall into reality. Whispers within the crackles of fire. Demons within shadows. Dancing. Enticing me. Paranoia. That night I had the most horrible nightmare, as sleep dominated over my physical and mental will. In my dream, I saw nothing other than decay and rot brought on by some worldwide disaster, some unknown apocalyptic cataclysm. From within the deepest dungeons inside of my mind, I envisioned myself walking the dark streets of my town, which sat dormant and days dead, past all the blackened houses, all the storefronts that were left only to the stray cats that roll, and past the rotting corpses that littered the street. In my most natural calm, I sidestepped and stepped over the bodies of people I once knew. In this alien world, it was only me and the dead to keep me morbid company. In a blinding flash of light and a deafening burst of sound, the dream world is brought back to light. I watched in awe as the dead stood up in a flurry of stiff, crackling, primitive movement, like a butterfly flapping its wings in front of a stop-motion camera. Completely unaware of me, they all began to partake in an orgy of life sorts. They lived through death in the most macabre way. The walking dead mobbed the streets and marched, en masse, into oblivion, into the darkness beyond. I wake up and feel even more dead than the waking corpses. Plunged into a darkness deeper than my dream, a sudden inexplicable fear washed over me. Paralyzed with fear, I sat unwillingly and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. I looked over and felt so stupid as the realization hit me that the candles went out while I was asleep. I got up to find the matches, and a new terror crawled up the nape of my neck. Not able to shake the feeling of being watched, I made haste to get into the kitchen, checking over my shoulders as I went. I expected to be confronted by some unspeakable terror stalking me from behind. The shadows played with my psyche, and horrifying demons formed out of the anonymous shadows that mercilessly enveloped the house. The shadows reached out to me. They spoke to me. They beckoned to me. I found the matches that would deliver me from the darkness and keep me safe. Keep me alive. As I walked alone in my house, I saw from the corner of my eyes the shadows retreating to the corners and creases created by the walls. Always surrounded, my heart rate accelerated as I turned to keep the demons at bay, in turn making myself vulnerable. With my flame dancing wildly, I could only think of nothing other than how, with every move I made, I'd run the risk of the flame blowing out. And then I'd really be fucked. Laying on the couch, in a fetal position, and sometimes twitching as the whispers grew louder and louder. I gave up on resisting the beckoning call of the living blackness within the shadows. Still continuing to increase in volume, the voices rose to a grand crescendo, nearly screaming into my ears. My head was in a vice of noise, and the clamp was pressing against my temple, ready to crush my skull at the slightest change in decibel level. Then, as suddenly as the noise started, it stopped. The call. Intrigued and relieved at the sudden peace that befell the house, I propped my head up with a couple of pillows. With my head up and my ears perked, an incessant ringing in my ears developed. The noise came at 1-second intervals. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. 3 Mississippi. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, it was the phone! The power grid must have come back on while I was in the grip of some mental breakdown. Slowly making my way up the stairs, the phone ring grew louder ever so gradually. Walking down the hall, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as if acting as the sentries against some unknown adversary. I passed by rooms filled only by dusty furniture, the darkness, and the unspeakable evils that had been plaguing me. The demons were in my house. There was no denying it. The thought of sharing my home with these beasts, only to be tormented day after day, deeply disturbed me. Despite my state of sheer terror, I casually walked down the hallway at a slow pace, so as to keep my calm and not attract attention to myself. In front of the home library, I stood at the threshold, debating whether or not to answer the phone. Taking the step in, I could almost feel the shadows caressing me. A sense of weightlessness came over me, as if I was suspended in some ethereal dream. Again. I walked toward the desk on which the phone sat, and with my hand mere inches over the receiver, I stood still, as if waiting for something to happen. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Nothing. The only sound that came out was the subliminal humming of dead air. Hello? Nothing. Then, in an explosion of sound that almost made me drop the phone, the sound of static and unintelligible rambling, deafening and dazed me temporarily. The static died down to a low rumble almost instantly. by the phantom caller speaking in a strange tongue. Still spoke, as loud as he did just seconds ago. From under the noises I could hear,
"You and me."
being repeated over and over again.
"You and me."
Just you and me. The ultimate realization hit me like a cement truck. The power wasn't back on. When I walked down the hall and through the house, not a single light flashed. Random times did not blink on and off the faces of the electronic clocks. I wanted to throw up. It felt like I'd just been jumped by a brick wall. The phone rang again. I feared picking it up. I did so nonetheless. Nothing. Static. Tongues.
"You and me."
I didn't bother putting the receiver back on the hook. I turned to walk out of the room and admit defeat. No dice. The door to the library slammed shut in my face. With a surreal calm, depressed stoicism, I tried to open the door now. To my surprise, it opened without any problem. I did not want to exit that room, though. I waited for someone to come up the stairs and face me. I waited to see someone at the end of the hall suddenly materialize. I waited to feel the icy hand of death come up from behind and wrap themselves around my throat. No such thing happens. Visions. In front of me, the hall stretched in length, as if I had been walking for miles on end and suddenly stopped. It stretched, and at the end of a black void materialized from the collective shadows, congealing into one mass like a blood clot, obscuring an artery. In an instant, everything snapped back to where it had once been. Then the doors that were just seconds before ajar suddenly violently slammed open and closed by themselves. It was as loud and violent as any 21-gun salute. From the darkness of the threshold of doors, I could see faces, blacker still, peering out whenever the doors opened. Open, face, slam shut, and repeat. The whole ordeal was like some fucked up, sadistic, psychotic, demonic whack-a-mole game. It lasted for what seemed like hours. An unbearable long demendo, the entire situation halted, as if someone stopped time itself in its tracks. My heart was pounding, and my blood was pumping as fast as possible. I jumped up to the door and quickly closed it behind me. I was not going out into the hallway, even if my life depended on it. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and I hardly let out a pep as a figure suddenly materialized outside of the second-story window, staring through me with eyes that were almost invisible to my naked eye. I watched as the being darker than the night itself back up and repeatedly rammed into the window pane, trying to break through. I guess I would leave the library after all, running through the hall, constantly looking over my shoulder to see if anything was giving me chase. I quickly turned a sharp right and descended down the stairs, carefully placing my steps as to not fall down. It wasn't so hard. Anyone so uncoordinated as a fall down a flight of stairs surely deserved to die. At the bottom of the staircase, I was face to face with another horrifying entity. Its face and palms were pressed up against the glass, which made it look like a bloated, boorish beast. When put against the night outside, its eyes were as black and soulless as its skin was pale. A disturbingly wide grin revealed teeth that were a disgustingly rotted mix of green, yellow, and blacks. Its short, quick, and shallow breath instantly appeared on the cold glass and almost as rapidly disappeared. I speedily turned on my heels and sprinted down the first-floor hallway past windows which were occupied by similarly terrifying monsters. I stop as I almost run into a wall, feeling all of their eyes on me. I slowly turn to face the beasts. Every single one of them looks at me with a primal, greedy, ravenous hunger that chilled me down to the marrow. Everywhere I moved, their eyes, and their eyes only, would follow. I screamed, and they found sadistic delight in my suffering. Their breath fogged up the glass, and the demons breathed more and more rapidly, their fists and palms hammering against the glass as they stood drooling and raving and chanting as they awaited their prey's surrender. The nightmare. Drowning in noise and sheer terror, I close my eyes and block my ears and scream. Above my shrill cries, I hear a humming. A brilliant radiance burns through my tightly closed eyes. I open my eyes and see nothing but pure whiteness, and as my sight adjusted, nothing beyond the windows. The power is back on. The lights are all on, and for the first time in days, the clocks tell the time. I sigh a long breath of relief. I relished in the light. Then with the return of electric life, the return of my family followed in close suit. Not telling anyone of my ordeal, I walked into the living room and shut off the lights, happily anticipating the comfortable flow of the television. As the light goes out, my jaw drops at the demonic horrors congregated along the living room windows. I was pale and frozen with fear. My parents looked at me and then outside the windows and asked, "What do you see?" "There's nothing out there."